Good morning, everybody. I'm going to make a start today. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are joining from today. I'm Neelam Patel, Chief Exec of MedCity, and it gives me great pleasure to host this webinar, giving an overview of 3 of the 7 national health data research hubs and how to engage with them. I'm hoping everybody can hear me and see me okay. So very briefly, unlocking the power of health data to fuel innovation in medical research and improve patient care is at the heart of today's healthcare revolution. So it's of no surprise that we have so many of you that have joined this event today. Welcome. The NHS is the single largest integrated healthcare provider in the world. Its patient records covering the entire UK population from birth to death is an estimated 55 million lives. And the Health Data Research Hubs was set up as part of a £37 million investment from UK government to create a UK-wide system for the safe and responsible use of health-related data on a large scale. Led by Health Data Research UK, the hubs are doing this while maintaining strict controls around data privacy and consent. Individually and together, the hubs are working to support earlier diagnosis, the discovery of new treatments, and more efficient health management systems, all of which have the potential to transform patients' lives and improve health outcomes. The hubs are all making high-quality datasets available via an online portal, the Health Data Research Innovation Gateway. And each of these hubs bring expertise in different areas, including cancer, real-world evidence, eye disease, advanced analytics, and artificial intelligence. MedCity works to support business to access the complex life sciences system. We help business find research, expertise, investment, and space, all the ingredients needed for the growth of the sector. And so we're very proud to be working with the hubs today and organising the session, and hopefully supporting you all that have joined us today to get more visibility into the data landscape. So before I go ahead and introduce the hubs and the rest of the event, just some housekeeping rules. Please keep your cameras off unless you're a speaker, and we will be recording the session. After an overview of the hubs, there will be a Q&A session. So please use the chat function to ask your questions, provide comments. Let's make this as interactive as possible. And at the end of the event, at the end of the presentations, you'll have an opportunity to go into a Zoom breakout room for smaller group 10-minute networking with each hub. I'm not sure how that technology will work with so many of you, but let's see. My colleague Sarah will give you some more details on how to join the Zoom sessions at the end of the Q&A. So before further ado, I'd like to introduce the first speaker, Amanda Lucas, who joins us from the hub Discover Now. Amanda.
Thank you so much, Neelam, and hello all. So I think my slides will come up when Sarah kindly moves them on. So yes, introducing myself. So I'm Amanda Lucas. I'm a director for Imperial College Health Partners. We are the Academic Health Science Network for North West London. And we are hosting one of these very exciting health data research hubs. Ours is called Discover Now, and we are the health data research hub for real world evidence. If you can just skip me on, Sarah, that'd be very kind. Thank you very much. So what are we about? So I'm going to give a brief introduction. I've got 5 minutes just to give you really good sort of headlights onto the hub and what we're about. And then in the later session, my colleague Dushan will take you through some of the services that are on offer in terms of how you might want to use the data for your type of business, and also to illustrate that by way of some of the examples and use cases of some research that's actually underway. We are very mature as a hub. We have over 80 different projects already sort of underway across a range of sort of customers and disease types. So we have a really exciting collaboration in Discover Now. The partners you see listed on this first slide. So you'll see some familiar partners there within IBM and Google. So IBM are building our trusted research environment, which is this new data infrastructure, high performance infrastructure to host our linked longitudinal data. We also have Google as a partner. We have AstraZeneca, who are a significant industry partner, who have been working very closely with us to really develop how we might use our linked longitudinal data for type 2 diabetes. And again, my colleague Dushan will take you through that example later on in the presentation. We have some exciting collaboration also with Northwest eHealth, who some of you may know, who are a Salford-based organisation who've been doing real world evidence type trials for a number of years now, so we've got a lot of experience in that, and we are implementing some of their technology, one called Farsight in particular, which enables us to find and recruit patients in primary care. Also included, just to note, are all of our hospitals in North West London, and also Huma, interesting partner. So they've formed part of the type 2 diabetes exemplar, whereby we're using Huma, who are a patient-generated app platform, to generate patient data and link it into healthcare data, which is really exciting. So in our data set, we have a linked longitudinal data for 2.5 million population in North West London. So that takes primary care, all of our hospital data, and also social care data. And within our hub, our challenge is to make that available for research. So let me just skip on to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So as Neelam helpfully said, we have a series of investments that we've been given by government and also by some of the partners that I have mentioned below. And we are using that investment to really build the data assets that we've got, and to build the sort of infrastructure that hosts them, the environments and the technology, and to build the capabilities for enable us to really optimize use of that great linked data. So these are some examples of how we're investing our money. So let's just highlight a couple of those for you, with the time being short today. One of those I'd highlight is data curation. So we have this already rich linked longitudinal data set. In fact, it's the largest linked longitudinal data set across Europe for 2.5 million population. So we are planning to enrich that by bringing new data sets in. So already we've brought in pathology data, which was precipitated by the COVID crisis, for need to see test results. We're now bringing the vaccination data for COVID. We're looking to bring in pollution data. So we've got quite exciting plans to bring in new data sets to scale some of our data. So hopefully by the time we're finished, we might have some more of the London data in, the wider London population data in, and also look at the quality of our data. I would also highlight the North West London Health Research Register. So we have an existing consent to contact register that we're also looking to accelerate, whereby we contact our population and try and get their consent to be part of future research, and we link that into their medical record, and we can then contact those patients or public and invite them to be part of future research opportunities. I would also highlight our public trust, which I think is absolutely fundamental to how we are working around this. And in fact, even today, we have a deliberation with the public later this evening around ensuring that we're really, as Neelam said, it's all about safe access to data, and that we're doing this in a safe and secure way. And we have really had the right permission and built the right trust around what we want to do with that data. So all these are very important components of our investment, which takes us into 2022. The next slide, please. This is my final slide, so hopefully I haven't gone over my 5 minutes, but I suppose just to conclude really, so what we have within Discover Now is a really exciting collection and combination of assets, as well as having access to a really rich data for our population in North West London. We have this unique position whereby we are connected very closely into this complex ecosystem we call the NHS. So we can reach out into the NHS in North West London and elsewhere. As an HSN, we are very connected into industry and academia, so we can draw upon those skills. And by bringing all of that together in this really rich ecosystem, we can hopefully bring new products into the market and try and test those out using the data and with some of these collaborations, which we believe is very supportive of the sort of general drive within the life sciences towards personalised care. So that's sort of our direction of travel, which we're very keen to explore and discuss with you in some of the later groups. And again, as I say, Dushan will be able to provide you with a bit more insight into some of the specifics around some of that. I think I'm handing over now. I think I'm concluding my brief introduction to Matt Cooper from DataCan, who'll give you a headline on DataCan, which is one of our other London hubs.
Super. Thanks, Amanda. Morning, everybody. Yes, I'm Matt Cooper. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for DataCan, and we're the health data research hub for cancer. And our aim is to improve the care and outcomes for people with cancer by making the high quality healthcare data more accessible for cancer researchers and health professionals. And we're unique, I guess, in the sense that we're working across all 4 nations. We're hosted by UCL Partners, which is the Academic Health Science Network based in London. But our other partners are University of Leeds and Leeds Teaching Hospitals, which represent the Yorkshire and Humber region. Queen's University Belfast, which represent Northern Ireland and Wales through their collaboration with the Health Data Research UK Centre there. Genomics England and also IQVIA, and IQVIA, the human data science company. Then IQVIA's part of this is, as our commercial partner, is to help build and develop a cancer data network across the UK, but also to help support DataCan with our commercial strategy. And James will talk a bit more about those sort of commercial things later on. So I guess the four key elements of what we're doing with DataCan up in the top left there is it's making high quality data sets available to the researchers, making it easy to access and find existing data sets, but also making it easy to find and use the data that's out there, either the data we have through our partners, through our stakeholders, or helping people source particular data sets, and obviously using the Innovation Gateway. We want to help facilitate researchers to access data and look into research into diagnostics and treatments and improvements in care by making better use of the data that's out there, and obviously supporting the stakeholders across the NHS, academia, commercial and charitable sectors. And key to that is publishing the metadata of the data sets we hold onto the Health Data Research UK Gateway, which is the sort of like the catalogue of the various data sets that are out there. If you come down to the bottom left, the whole real-time data piece has become more and more important, and I think we first drew the attention of the government and academia and the NHS and the public to this sort of effects of COVID-19 on cancer services and cancer patients by using real-time data from the NHS. And it became apparent it wasn't, the system wasn't able to determine the sort of the direct or indirect effects of COVID-19 on the cancer populations because of the latency of the data that was out there currently. And we were able to sort of fill that gap by accessing quickly and efficiently data from NHS trusts and analysing that. And the data sets we looked at were the 2-week waiting time for cancer referrals, when we found that 7 out of 10 people with suspicion of cancer weren't getting referred, and looking at chemotherapy attendances, 4 out of 10 patients weren't getting access to chemotherapy. And that was really important, really, to highlight this to government and to policymakers. And building on the successes of that, we're producing a real-time data network across NHS partner organisations, helping build that sort of capability out there to really report in real-time manners. And we're looking again for more NHS trusts to join us in that endeavour. Up in the top right, working with patients is absolutely key to everything that we're doing, making sure that data is being used in a transparent and responsible manner. And our patients are involved in all parts of DataCan. They're on the steering board, the management groups, they're involved in recruitment of staff and the review of the contracts. And also training for other members and the public in how better to use data and understanding better why a better use of health data, health research data is good for the population as a whole. And it was a great moment for us this year where one of our patient public involvement engagement members, Maisie McKenzie, was appointed to the National Data Guardian panel. And that's the first time that a patient member has been appointed to the Guardians panel. And in the bottom right, supporting more patients into trials through matching software. So IQVIA, through the cancer data network they're setting up, are going to be able to, in the future, allow NHS organisations to make use of the existing cancer data through dashboards that they're going to be creating to pre-screen patients for potential involvement in trials, and that hopefully will increase the accuracy of matching patients to study criteria. So that's a brief overview of what DataCan is up to, and James will go into some more specifics later on in today's session. So I'd like to hand over now to Piers Keane at Insight. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, for handing over to me for that. So first of all, just to introduce myself, my name is Piers Keane. I'm a consultant ophthalmologist at Moorfields Eye Hospital in London. I'm also an associate professor at the Institute of Ophthalmology at University College London. And more importantly, I'm the Deputy Director and Chief Data Officer for the Insight Health Data Research Hub. And one of the things that I hope to be able to suggest to you, both in this introduction and the case studies that follow, is that healthcare does have the potential to be transformed by artificial intelligence, and that ophthalmology and indeed the Insight Hub is at the forefront of this and can be an exemplar for other medical specialties in this regard. Can I have the next slide, please? So the Insight Hub, like many of the other hubs, was founded in 2019, and really our core mission is to try to use data to to stop people from going blind. Now, in particular, if we go to the next build, please. We have a really strong focus on applying artificial intelligence to ophthalmic data sets, and that's something I'll talk about in the next section, with a particular focus on something called deep learning. And then the other thing that I'd just like to emphasize is that although our primary focus is on preventing blindness and curing blindness, actually we're also interested in a much larger area that we have termed oculomics. And this is the idea that we can use the eye as a window to the rest of the body to gain insights into systemic health. And next slide, please. So, and build, please. So just to say, the team is led by Professor Alistair Denniston, who's a professor at University Hospitals Birmingham. And next build, please. And University Hospitals Birmingham are the lead NHS trust for this. And for those of you who are not aware, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital at UHB is the largest single centre NHS site in the country. And the other key partner is Moorfields Eye Hospital, with which I'm affiliated. Now, Moorfields Eye Hospital is the oldest eye hospital in the world, and it's the largest eye hospital in either Europe or North America. So just by reference, we see more than double the number of patients per year than the largest centre in the United States. Now, also with the Insight Hub, we have Google and Roche as industry partners, plus the charity partner Action Against AMD, and the University of Birmingham as an academic partner providing advanced analytics capabilities. We have a number of other supporting institutions, including MedCity, and importantly, the input and support of the Open Data Institute, founded by Sir Tim Berners-Lee. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in our case studies. And next slide, please. So long story short, in the last year since Insight has been formed, we have now created the world's largest bioresource of ophthalmic data. And it's not just high dimensional imaging, but also all of the clinical data that goes with that. And essentially, if there is any ophthalmic data of interest, it is guaranteed that we will have the world's largest source of that data. And this is something I'm looking forward to telling you a little bit more about in the case studies. But with that, I'm going to hand back over to Neelam to begin to introduce those.
Thank you very much, Amanda, Matt and Piers. So you've had an overview of the hubs, and for the next 40-45 minutes, we're going to see how the hubs really bring their work to life through some case studies. So I'd like to invite Dusan actually now to kick off, please.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Just by way of introduction, my name is Dusan Saska. I'm the Business Development Lead for Discover Now, and I'd like to give you today introduction about our service offer, overview of those services, and also highlight some of the exciting case studies we've been involved in at Discover Now. Next slide, please. Thank you, Sarah. I would like to take you through a little bit more about how we might differ to some of the organizations you might already be working with, whether that's in the UK or globally. So in terms of what we do differently with regards to access to the data, we already have developed a mature information governance model that enables us to provide quite agile access to the data to our researchers. In practice, our data access committee meets monthly and provides a decision on the data access request on the day that enables you to be able to access the data very quickly afterwards. In normal times, we tend to turn around these requests in about 2 to 4 weeks. And we are also quite transparent with regards to our pricing. And we have established tiered pricing for SMEs and NHS organizations who benefit from lower pricing. With regards to the data, this is quite key, of course, and we are always looking to bring new data sets, and I will talk about our current data set in a moment, but we are, of course, looking both at bringing the data in real time, but also continuously curate and improve our existing data set. It's quite a unique element that we can bring new data in and enrich the existing data for specific projects. And we have established methods to link the data on patient level as well, which can be quite exciting and very useful for particular types of research or service evaluations projects. With regards to the new data flows, I also would like to highlight that we have worked quite hard over the last 12 months to secure new data flows that as a result of the pandemic. And we have a number of COVID data sets available, whether that's for testing, for vaccination, for COVID patients' outcomes, but also, as alluded by Amanda earlier, we are looking at linking with other data sets, for example, the neonatal national data set that is held by Imperial, as well as bringing in some new data that are different to what you would expect from electronic health records, like patient-reported data, to name just a few. In terms of the experience, ICHP, Imperial College Health Partners, who is the hosting organization for the hub, has over 60 employees, and we also have a rich network of collaborators from Imperial College, from Earl Brompton, and the North West London health sector in general. And our in-house experts, whether they are in advanced data extraction, health economists, statisticians, data analysts, and project leads, work very closely in collaboration with these principal investigators or KOLs and our clients to really make sure that the research outputs we produce are of high quality, scientifically robust. All of the work we do is underpinned by the public trust. So we've run one deliberative engagement with over 100 Londoners already, and this has yielded some very interesting insights about the public's views on use of healthcare data. And we have set up a separate group that has been already mentioned by Amanda earlier. So this is a citizens advice group where we are asking 40 Londoners to participate and give their views about the terms and conditions that would enable direct access to our data set for third parties. Next slide, please. I'd like to tell you a little bit more about the Discover data set. So this is data set that is linked, longitudinal costed data set. So we have patient level data on a population of about 2.5 million in Northwest London. To give you a bit more background, it's a highly ethnically diverse population. We've got a significant amount of richness there. So from the primary care going to secondary care, acute care, community health care, and also some other data sets that you may not find in elsewhere, like social care data. We also flow in the high cost drugs data set, pathology data that now comes in daily, that includes the COVID test, and also CDREP data for those who might be familiar with CDREP data. So what this richness enables us to do is to look at not just the sort of clinical pathway, but look really at the deeper health resource utilization, look at how we can demonstrate that some of the outcomes that patients are having can be improved. And this lends itself very well to number of different studies or types of studies, and I will walk you through how that translates into our service offer. Next slide, please. So this is just a sort of a summary slide to give you some idea in terms of the range and variety of the projects we have been working on. So in terms of the data access and projects, there has been over 30 COVID-specific requests for research. And we also work very closely with academic partners, charities, and NHS bodies. Currently, the majority of the studies we have are industry-led, so where we have a commercial partner, whether that's from biotech, pharma, medtech, or startups in the digital health space. I also wanted to just give you some idea of about where we have sort of historically done studies. So we are a disease agnostic hub, so we don't focus on one disease. So you can see the variety of the different disease areas where we have worked on previously, but we are always open to look into any disease, provided that the sort of numbers are there. And I will tell you a little bit more about how we work with clients on the next slide. Thank you. So I think for the initial engagement with any clients, of course, if you have a clear idea of what you would like to research, we provide you with that sort of initial data feasibility. So we can support you with making that initial decision if the discovered data set is the right one for your study. Does it have the minimum numbers of patients you would expect to have for the relevant sample size? But also we work with our sort of clinical network and locate a Northwest principal investigator in Northwest London. These come from some of the world leading academic and clinical centers of excellence, and their input provides further insight and oversight, as well as that academic and scientific rigor these studies should have. So in terms of how the studies sort of fall into various places, I'd like to highlight the retrospective studies. So this is the ones where we would analyze the retrospective data already collected. We look usually on a patient cohort, and as alluded earlier, we look at pathway mapping, the burden of the disease, for example. We look at various reasons for underdiagnosis or health resource utilizations of that patient cohort. In terms of service evaluation, this is looking at evaluating newly implemented interventions or interventions that might have been in the service for a while, and looking at their effectiveness and cost effectiveness. And this is used by organizations to understand and demonstrate to the payers or providers that the solution actually provides value for money and it improves patient outcomes. Building onto this, we also looking at how we can support industry with streamlining patient recruitment. So we have a couple of different service offers around this particular piece. One of them is our aforementioned consent to contact registrar. So we have proactively recruited thousands of patients in Northwest London that are on our consent to contact registrar and can be reached directly to participate in the research. And we also have Farsight, that is the feasibility and recruitment tool that enables recruitment from primary care directly and greatly accelerates this access model to the patients and enables the identification of cohorts that can be difficult to locate. Next slide, please. Very briefly, we are currently working with IBM on the trusted research environment. And this is something that is quite key to our service offer. So we're building a high-performance web-based TRE that would provide researchers from third parties direct access. And we are working on developing a subscription-based model that will provide companies more tailored view of the patient cohort they wish to study, do machine learning studies or AI algorithm or testing or validation. So we anticipate companies will want to use this service, especially when in those cases where they would prefer to have direct access. And however, we will continue to operate our current model as well of providing experts to our clients and running the entire length of the project. Next slide. So I would like to take you through the type 2 diabetes case study I've listed here. So this is one which we have run with our partners, so AstraZeneca, Huma, Imperial College London, and our healthcare sector in Northwest London. So this really demonstrates some of the end-to-end services that we offer. So the objectives of this study is to provide consistently high quality, accessible and cost-effective care at scale, improve clinician access and increase patient engagement and involvement in their own health. Next slide. So in terms of this particular study, we looked at, first of all, how the data is used. So we wanted to establish how the patients are managed. Currently, we wanted to look at ways how we can improve that together with our partners. And it's a very agile design approach where we have a clinical study entailed in this. So first of all, various stakeholders contributed towards understanding the baseline. We've conducted a pilot and we are running a service evaluation. So all of this is underpinned by the patient-reported outcomes in this particular case. So our partner Huma is enabling us to enrich the data set we have and bring the new data into the data set that will then enable to understand both the sector in North West London, the company, and other stakeholders and clinicians about the effectiveness of this solution. And it's a very close collaboration entailing also our charity partner, No Diabetes, that really gives us a good understanding about what the patients are going through and how we can improve their care. Next slide, please. So I'd like to just briefly walk you through some of the other examples. So the first one was actually a recruitment study where we recruited patients for COPD with a quite high success rate. We did a COVID life survey study, which was at the height of the pandemic, where we were asked to support the COVID efforts to understand more about the life of patients impacted by COVID. We did a study with a digital health app called Ovice, that is a breast cancer app looking at the effectiveness of this solution. We did atrial fibrillation project with NHS Right Care, and we also did another study on hypogonadism. So these are also the various projects that enable you to see the sort of breadth and scope of the projects we can do using our data set. Next slide. So on this slide, I've summarized some of the publication and abstracts we have published over the last year or so, or over the last couple of years, I should say, using the health data set in North West London. They all were published in sort of leading publications. So I hope the slides will make it to at the end of the presentation or shortly afterwards. You can review the slides and also get the links to these papers. So some of the interesting ones, for example, the chronic cough project, which has led to a build of a digital dashboard, was very interesting. The COPD patients continue to smoke after being diagnosed for COPD was a very interesting piece of research, as well as the mental health disorders. The ADAPT trial paper was the one which relates to the Ovice publication project we are running currently. The one I would like to highlight, though, is the first one, how electronic health record became a real-world research resource. And this particular paper compares the CPRD with our data set and looks at the key advantages of using Discover data set compared to CPRD. And with this in mind, I'm aware that I'm probably going just according to timeline. I would like to thank you for the attention, and I'll pass on to James Peach, the Commercial Director of DataCan.
Thanks very much, Dusan. And I can strongly recommend Discover Now. We've been working kind of with them as a co-hub for a long time, and they've really got the credibility. And as you can see from Dusan's work, have been delivering commercial projects for quite some time. So I'm James Peach. I'm the Commercial Director of DataCan, the Health Data Research UK Hub for Cancer. And I'm also Commercial Advisor to Cancer Research UK about their data portfolio. And secondarily, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of a little startup in Northern Ireland. So for those of you who are in the SME world, I know some of your pain, so I will not waste any of your time, and I'll get straight down to explaining how we can help you, how we can work with you, and hopefully we will be able to work with you. Next slide, please. So this goes from Matt's introduction around DataCan to the more specifics around the kind of day-to-day of what we are doing now. I mean, this is a slide that is a little bit old now. We are doing it now. So there's three key areas that we are active in. First one on the left is trying to get cancer data more accessible. Trying to get it easier to get into a researcher's hands. The second area, then in the middle, is to make that research data more useful. And finally, we've had a growing area which has been around real-time data. And this is something that's quite different from the other pieces and has been actually, perhaps under COVID, one of the most interesting areas we've been working on. So in improving access, there's two large areas of activity we have. The first is to make it easier for you as researchers to find appropriate cancer data sets. And that is by getting metadata about them. So this is not the underlying data itself, but this is just descriptive data, something like the data model, the access rules, the number of patients, those sorts of things, and putting that metadata on the Health Data Research UK Gateway. And thank you very much, Neelam, for putting that in the chat. That's way up at the top of the task. You can find that. You can go in there and you can type in lung cancer, or you can type in diabetes, or indeed any therapeutic area you're interested in, and it will show you the metadata that has been uploaded to that gateway and who you need to contact to get access to that. So that's one of the things we're doing at the moment. Second thing in improving access is working with researchers and data controllers to support them to reach agreements about data access. Now, I did a piece of work for HDI UK before joining the hub around what was the critical issue around commercial access to data in the UK. And the biggest theme that came up was the unpredictability of data access agreements in terms of time and terms and the rest of those. So what we're doing is we're working with both controllers and researchers to explain what are reasonable terms, what are the sorts of contracts that we can be put into. And we've had great help from NHSX's Centre of Excellence, as well as Health Data Research UK Central, who are producing a set of standard templates, legal documents for this. So in the middle, in terms of making the data more useful, the top thing is to try and get data from environments where researchers can't work on it, which may be behind a firewall, it may be in a database that's not actually used for research, to take that and put it into trusted research environments. And Dusan has described the IBM one that Discover Now is putting together. We've got a couple we're working with at the moment. One is Genomics England, where I used to work. Genomics England obviously has got, to my mind, the best genomic trusted research environment, certainly in UK, potentially in Europe. We can carry on. And then the other one we're working with is the Yorks and Humber LICRA. So this is a trusted research environment that's been put together for the population of Yorkshire and the Humber, so about 6 million or so. And this is very secure and particularly well designed for clinical data analytics. So you've got Genomics England for the genetics end and Yorks and Humber for the clinical end. Second thing in terms of making data more usable is curation. And you'll all know that curation is about 80% of the cost of any data science piece. We have a combination of software tools. So we use, up in Leeds, we're using the Lingomatics NLP platform as an example, and also people. At the end of the day, there isn't yet an NLP program that does it all for us. And therefore being able to take a skilled curator who understands cancer data and can take unstructured or uncoded records and improve the quality of either their coding or their structuring is vital. So we have a team up in Leeds that can do that. And that team not only includes curation, that middle point, but also the ability to do analytics and research. So we have analysts and statisticians who can work on that on your projects. And as well as that, we often link people with other organizations that can do this. So we have pointed people towards Discover Now, obviously, but there are also many other groups. So the pathology centers that are out there, the genomics medicine centers and the rest. So we will both help you ourselves, but we'll also signpost you to others. In real-time data, we started off, IQVIA as a core partner of ourselves, has been working on a European network of bringing together cancer data to enable the identification of patients for clinical trials, and also allow those hospitals to compare each other between themselves to understand and reduce any variations in care. IQVIA is continuing to do that through the Oncology Data Network in the UK and rolling that out. And in parallel, what we discovered under COVID was there was a very urgent need for very short-term data. And by that, I mean week-old data, the sort of data that you're seeing on a perhaps daily basis around COVID infections. We need to understand this data to understand the effect of COVID on cancer services and cancer patients. And many of you will have seen the press articles around here. A lot of that came out of an initial piece of work we did in the middle of last year to really try and understand what has been the impact of COVID on cancer services. And you're well aware of the incredible impact it's had on referral rates, patients turning up, and our ability to actually deliver certain services like colonoscopies. So these are the big areas we're working on, and all of these data access and services do rely on the approval of data controllers, which is absolutely vital, and the permission of patients. Next slide, please. So in terms of how precisely we work with companies, and very happy to talk to you individually and take questions during this or afterwards. The critical point is that we are patient-led, and that means patients review and approve all of our commercial work. We do not ask them their opinion, we ask them their permission. So if there's anything that we are asked to do that seems in any way unusual to patients, they can either say, go back and ask the question again, or they can say, no, this doesn't seem to be an appropriate piece of work. Now, obviously, they will do this under confidentiality agreements, but it's important to realize, and this is vital for both people who want to use the data, but also those people who are giving data, that patients always have the chance to say no to any of the commercial work we do. In terms of the pricing, our overall model is that we deliver NHS-focused work for free in return for the data that the NHS is sharing with us. Academic work we do at cost, and commercial work we do at fair value. And this follows the NHS 5 principles about fair value. Exactly what fair value is obviously depends on what data you're accessing, but we've been able to work through this with a number of proposals with a number of commercial customers. Obviously, we help people for free in terms of advice, and there are a number of people on the call today who we have helped today, and I hope they will tell you that we've been helpful. Generally, what we'll do is we'll have an initial call, try and understand what your cancer data needs are, advise you if we or others might be able to help with that. But if that turns into something where the workload is likely to be significant, we'll tell you, we'll put together a proposal and a price, and you can do that or not. In terms of confidentiality, of course, we can enter into the usual confidentiality agreements unless the patients tell us not to. And particularly for those of you who might be working for contract research organizations that are not IQVIA, we do a lot of work with IQVIA, but we're also able to work independently of them, or indeed any other partner, if your commercial needs mean that you would prefer to be confidential from one or other of our partners. Next slide, please. So now to touch on some examples of commercial projects we have done or in the process of doing. At the top, a very classic data curation analysis piece. This is where a large pharmaceutical company has come to us and said, we are interested in collecting real world data from UK cancer patients and understanding how that could fit in with a HTA assessment they've got coming up. So what we did with them is we worked through feasibility and then proposal, and we're now in the process of doing the initial data curation. So we've identified we've got the number of patients we need. Now we need to make sure that all of those patients have all of the structured data at the quality we need. So a combination of NLP and manual curation. We then link this, because we're doing this across 2 large cancer centres, one in Scotland, one in England, and then the statistical analysis to understand in this tumour type with these sorts of treatments, what likely outcomes are for this patient. So a very classic piece of HTA work. Before then, we've completed a couple of consultancy, so advisory pieces of work. The first one was pretty confidential actually, but I'll just say it was for a global technology company, and it included both data work and patient work and commercial work and clinical work. So a real mix of all those areas. Then the next one was a global pharmaceutical company who were looking to understand how they could work in the UK around cancer data. And in that one, we worked in partnership with another UK consultancy. We were the data specialists and the other consultancy were the generalists. And that was, again, a very, very useful piece of work and is turning into a longer term partnership, which is great. We've also, in terms of commercial companies, had a number of grants. The real-time data network that Matt mentioned, and I touched on here, has really kind of captured our need and the opportunity for better data to help cancer patients. So I'm really grateful to both Janssen and Roche, who have given us medical and educational goods and services grants to help us reinforce and expand that real-time data network. A lot of my day is advisory unpaid stuff, which is completely understandable. So just to give you some examples of the sorts of people we've talked to, there was a company that we did quite a bit of work with in our first year around the feasibility of finding cancer patients with rare somatic mutations for a global data science project. As that was just feasibility work, we did that for free. We supported a cancer data SME and a big pharma company around a successful Innovate UK Cancer Genomics bid, which is great, delighted for that. And also we do a lot of introductions, particularly to people who, data controllers who have specific data sets of interest. So be that pathology, digital pathology, radiology, those sorts of things are pretty much the day-to-day. Next slide, please. Just to give you an idea of the data sets that we have, and obviously the first place to ask would be to go to the metadata gateway. But this is just a little summary of some of the data that's up there and some data that's not yet up there. So in terms of what's in the trusted research environment, the top one is about 500,000 linked patient records, including both primary and secondary care data, which is an enormous thanks to Macmillan for funding this work, the comprehensive patient records for cancer outcomes. What they wanted to fund was a data set that would allow following patients for a long period of time in both primary and secondary care, so we could really understand the long-term outcomes. So that's in the trusted research environments in the Yorkshire and Humber LICRA. That's completely anonymized. Genomics England cancer data set, the second one then, 15,000 linked tumour and normal whole genome sequence, and a range of primary secondary data that is getting richer all the time. And I know where they're doing a specific piece of curation around a certain tumour type. So again, you don't have to look at all of it, and there may be some curation work, but that's one that we're working with. And then going into paediatrics, we've been doing a piece of work with both Great Ormond Street, UCL, and the Yorks and Humber Paediatric Registry to bring in a range of paediatric clinical trials. We currently have 650 patients from there, and also paediatric respiratory data, so that can be worked on. So those are examples of data sets. These are the examples of data sets that researchers can come in and do their analysis on within the trusted research environment. There are other data sets where we can do the research ourselves on your behalf. And this is the second area that DataCan delivered, feasibility analysis. And this is multi-site, anonymized, curated EHR effectively from 2 large cancer centers. So you will ask us a question, we will go in there, we will do the feasibility about the number of patients we can find. And then if we come to the appropriate terms, we will then deliver the entire analysis on and further discussions with you, of course. The last one, which is a data set in progress, which is the real-time data that we are building. This is a very thin slice of data. It's really just the data you need to understand the impact on cancer services, but we're getting that from a number of sites, both in England and in other UK nations. That's, like I said, in process, and we will keep posted on that. That is kind of much more of a service improvement and epidemiological data set. It's quite thin, but quite broad. But the most important thing is it is very, very recent. Next slide, please. So in terms of how you can work with us, the first thing to do is please do get in touch. You've got both of the websites there, both the DataCan website and the Health Data Gateway site. DataCan website will tell you about us, and I think it's very useful. If you want to get in touch with us, please do get in touch with me, but also take a look in there across our team of clinical and research specialists, and it may well be you know one of them already. So obviously it's much easier if there's an introduction we know, but if not, please do come to myself. You've got my email up there, and also Phil Waywell, who's our commercial manager, and I think is on the call as well today, and he'll be in the breakout room. So thank you very much for your time and your patience. Really looking forward to being able to work with you if I can. And now to hand over to Piers Keane back in Insight.
Thank you, James, for handing over to me. So I'm going to be talking about some case studies for the Insight Health Data Research Hub, and hopefully you know, conveying to you and reinforcing to you that there is the potential to reinvent the way that we do eye examination using the data at Insight. Next slide, please. And next build. So I thought it'd be useful just to give a little bit of background to the work we've done prior to the Insight, to the formation of the Insight Hub, and how it informs what we can offer going forward. So one of the things that I love to talk about in almost every lecture that I give is the fact that since 2017, ophthalmology has overtaken orthopedics as the #1 busiest of all the medical specialties in the National Health Service in terms of clinic appointments. In fact, nearly 10% of all clinic appointments on the NHS are for eyes. That constitutes nearly 10 million appointments per year. And that's a number that has been rising like this over the last 5 years. So in some senses, we are really drowning in the number of patients that we need to see. And that presents particular challenges then in that some patients can lose sight because they can't be seen and treated quickly enough. Now, this is a problem not just in Moorfields or in Birmingham, not just in the NHS, but around the world as a whole. And it's really consistent with the fact that we have aging population and increased prevalence of diseases such as diabetes that can cause severe problems in the eyes. Next build, please. Now, at the Insight Hub, we're particularly focused on the applications of artificial intelligence to healthcare data. And to be more specific, when I'm talking about AI, I'm talking about the most sophisticated, most recent flavor of artificial intelligence, which is called deep learning. And in 2015, deep learning was highlighted by Scientific American as one of the world-changing ideas of the year. And we feel that while there's a lot of hype around this, it does have truly transformative potential in the coming years. Next slide, please. So the background then to our work in this space is that in July 2016, Moorfields Eye Hospital, where I'm a consultant, signed a formal research collaboration agreement with the artificial intelligence company DeepMind. And of course, most of the people on the call will be familiar with the fact that the parent company of DeepMind is Alphabet or Google. And next slide, please. Now, essentially in this collaboration, we worked to develop a deep learning system that was able to look at these retinal scans. These are called OCT scans, or optical coherence tomography scans, that are now the dominant imaging modality in all of ophthalmology. Now, these are a 3-dimensional imaging with a resolution of about 5 micrometers. So these are very sophisticated scans that have an order of magnitude higher resolution than an MRI or a CT scan. And we do many thousands of them per day or per week at Moorfields, and indeed around the NHS and around the world. So essentially, what we were able to do in this collaboration is share with DeepMind about 1.2 million anonymized retrospective OCT scans plus associated clinical metadata. And that was back in July 2016. So we've got a lot of experience working with an industry partner, sharing data with industry partners outside the NHS, and doing it in a way that is both technically sophisticated, but also respects the issues around ethics and data protection and information governance. Next slide, please. So we published the first results of this collaboration in the journal Nature Medicine in August of 2018. And essentially what we're able to do is develop a deep learning system that was able to look at an OCT scan, evaluate it for more than 50 different sight-threatening retinal diseases, and identify those patients with the most sight-threatening disease to prioritize them to get in front of someone like me, a retinal specialist in an NHS hospital eye clinic. Next build, please. Now, you know, we were really excited about this, and it was amazing to publish in a journal like Nature Medicine. And one of the other exciting things about this work was that it received global media attention. And this is just one example of that. Next slide, please. So where we are with this work now is that we've published this proof of concept in Nature Medicine, and now we're thinking about how we can work with Google Health to go from code to clinic. So how it can be used within hospital eye services, and how we can have the flexible pathways in the NHS so that we can really take advantage of the latest breakthroughs in AI. And next build, please. But what we're really interested in, I think, is how we can link hospitalized services with community optometry and community general practices, because we think the promise of AI is increasingly going to be how we can bring world-class expertise from the hospital into the community and maybe even into the home of patients in the future. Next slide, please. So, as I said in my introduction, the background to all of this, the technical infrastructure that we had begun to build, the experience around the governance and ethical approvals required, led to us forming the Insight Health Data Research Hub for eye health in October 2019. Next slide, please. Now, we've been extremely busy over the last year building out this cloud-based data pipeline, first at Moorfields, and then recapitulating that at University Hospitals Birmingham. And then in the course of 2021, we hope to roll this out at a number of other NHS trusts. And we believe that this cloud-based infrastructure is going to be the future of use of healthcare data. And build, please. And just to highlight, we at Moorfields have now got about 15.7 million ophthalmic images within this data pipeline, and about 8.9 million images within the data pipeline at University Hospitals Birmingham. So this is not just tabular data, this is not just electronic health record data, but this is 15.7 million high dimensional images, and not 8.9 million images in the Birmingham setting. Next slide, please. Now, I think it'd be good to take you through 2 or 3 different case studies. So one of the things that we're particularly focused on is something called wet age-related macular degeneration, or AMD. And if you could just build through all of this paragraph of text just to make it easier. So why does AMD matter? Well, the fact is that AMD is the commonest cause of blindness in the UK by far, commonest cause of blindness in Europe, United States, and many other countries. And it's becoming more and more of a problem as our populations get older. In fact, there was an article published in the British Journal of Ophthalmology just earlier this year, which estimated that 25% of those people over the age of 60 have the early or intermediate forms of AMD in Europe. So these are truly staggering, truly jaw-dropping numbers. For the most severe form, wet age-related macular degeneration, we have about 200 people who develop the blinding form of this condition every single day just in the United Kingdom. Next slide, please. So one of the first data sets that we will be making available through HDR UK is the Moorfields wet AMD dataset. Now, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about this dataset, much of the details have been published in November 2020 in the journal JAMA Ophthalmology. Next build, please. And so this consists of every patient at Moorfields who's received anti-VEGF therapies over a 12-year period. So this is over 10,000 eyes receiving these anti-VEGF, these anti-angiogenic injections. We have over 1,000 new cases presenting per year, and this is the largest single center database of AMD anywhere in the world. Next slide, please, or next build, please. And the other thing to highlight is just the scale of ophthalmic data at Moorfields. We deliver just under 50,000 intravitreal injections for AMD at Moorfields every year, and that is projected to double by 2030. Next slide, please. So the first data set is the AMD data set. We're also interested in diabetic retinopathy data set. So if you build through that paragraph. Now, diabetic eye disease is the commonest cause of blindness in people of working age. About 4 million people are affected by it in the United Kingdom alone. And there's proven benefits from the national screening service that we have in the UK. Next slide, please. So the second major data set that we'll be making available is the West Midlands diabetic retinopathy data set. And if you just do the next build. And so this is probably the best diabetic retinopathy data set in the world. This consists of about 8.75 million diabetic retinopathy retinal photographs with associated clinical metadata. Next slide, please. Now, the next case study that I just want to tell you about is this idea of oculomics. And this is the idea that we can use the eye as a window to the rest of the body. And this is something that, you know, people have been thinking about for more than 100 years, but has really been supercharged in the last couple of years with the advent of deep learning. So with deep learning, we can now look at a retinal photograph like this and say, this is a woman. And next build, please. And with deep learning, we can say not just this is a woman, we can say she's 58 years old. She's a non-smoker. She's not diabetic. Her BMI is around 25 and her blood pressure is about 150/85. Now, you may say, what's the point of that? There are easier ways to tell if it's a man or a woman than applying deep learning to a retinal photograph, or there are more accurate ways to measure blood pressure than applying deep learning to a retinal photograph. But the reason why this has got the research community extremely excited is it because it hints at the potential of deep learning to really unearth new discoveries within these retinal images. And this is this idea of AI-assisted scientific discovery. Next slide, please. Now, what we have done at the Insight Hub is actually taken all of the ophthalmic imaging that has been done at Moorfields, which, as I've described, is many millions of scans, and we have now linked it with the NHS Digital Hospital Episode Statistic Database. So we know every person who has had retinal imaging done at Moorfields or other ophthalmic imaging done at Moorfields who has gone on to develop any cardiovascular or any other neurodegenerative diseases. And in fact, the numbers are pretty staggering. So in many cases, we have 2 to 3 orders of magnitude more incident cases of these cardiovascular and neurodegenerative diseases than other large prospective cohort studies, such as UK Biobank. Now, next build, please. Now, it should be highlighted that it took us about 2.5 years to get permissions to make all of this linkage. So this is a process that we started even before Insight. And we haven't yet published any work using this because it's just relatively hot off the presses. But if you're interested in learning more about it, it was written about in The Economist in December 2019. And the reason why The Economist wrote that article was because they really were excited about the attention to detail that we put in place around the governance and around the data protection issues, building on the experiences that we have. Next slide, please. So in particular, we're very excited around the governance advances that we're building at the Insight Hub. So one of our major partners that I've mentioned previously is the charity Action Against AMD. And Action Against AMD have been working with the Open Data Institute, next bill please, one of our supporting institutions, and they have created something called the Insight Data Trust Advisory Board. And so this is an independent group of about 10 patients, members of the public, and other learned citizens who can give independent input into the access to any of the data that we provide in the Insight Hub. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about the access and services that we provide. So our data sets, as with all the other hubs, will be made available through the HDR UK Innovation Gateway. At the moment, there's not a huge amount to see from the Insight Hub in that regard, but in the next month, we'll be uploading details of the Moorfields AMD dataset and the West Midlands Diabetic Retinopathy Screening dataset. But we actually, and then we intend to upload 30 or more different ophthalmic data sets in the coming months. But really what we envisage is a much more bespoke process for data set curation, because we recognize that industry partners, pharmaceutical companies, SMEs, tech companies often have very bespoke requirements for the data. And so we're working to develop user interfaces and processes that will allow people to interact with me and other members of the team to really get the data sets that they require. And the bottom line is that pretty much any ophthalmic data sets that you can possibly imagine will be available through this hub. Next build, please. And so we think of the access and services in 3 different ways. So the first thing, and perhaps the easiest, is that we can provide analytics capability, consultancy capability. One of our partners, our academic partner, is the University of Birmingham, where we have access to very sophisticated pharmacoepidemiological expertise and experience in working with large data sets. But I think we're probably even more excited about our ability to make available extremely large ophthalmic imaging data sets with the associated electronic health record data. And clearly we have a strong track record in working with industry in this regard. And then lastly, something that I just want to highlight that I think is going to become even more important in the future is that we have the capability now to rapidly develop deep learning tools in-house at the Insight Hub, and to package those in a way that they can be easily shared and deployed. So for example, if an industry partner wants us to develop a tool that they can use to identify patients with AMD for clinical trial recruitment, we can develop that and package that and license it to them for use. Or if they want to have a tool, we'll say a diabetic retinopathy screening tool, we can develop that, package that, and license it to them to take it through regulatory approvals to make it into software as a medical device. And my last slide, please. So if you want to contact us, those are our details. I hope in a slightly croaky voice, over the last 10 or 15 minutes, I've been able to convince you that with the Insight Hub, we have the potential to take the eye examination, which for the last 100 years has depended on the slit lamp biomicroscope, and actually reinvent it for the 21st century using big data and using artificial intelligence. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass back over to Neelam for questions and answers.
Thank you very much indeed, Dusan, James and Piers, for that fascinating insight into the work that you are doing. You've talked about accessibility of real-time data in trusted research environments, the curation, the deep learning, and also the clinical and academic expertise you offer to actually interpret some of that data and reach the outcomes that are so valuable. So thank you for that. We've also heard that the work you do isn't without challenges, and you've talked about privacy, trust, contracting, making sure that the data sets are clean and usable. So with that, I wanted to go to the audience here actually, and I'm hoping that you all that have joined this webinar have been able to put some of your questions down so that we can ask the panel. Can I, while I go into the chat function, can I ask the speakers for this Q&A session just to make themselves visible on camera? And can I also encourage the audience to put their questions down? This is a fantastic opportunity to get these three teams together at once. So please use that opportunity. I'm going to actually kick off with the first question that I saw on chat from Samir actually. And Samir, if you want to make yourself visible and ask yourself, that's absolutely fine. I can't actually see you on my screen, but I'll wait a minute, otherwise I'll go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Neelam. Yes, I'm here. So wonderful talks, first of all, today. So really insightful, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences. My question was around the challenges in aggregated patient data. I use that a lot in terms of payer-ready health economics and real-world evidence type of work. Some of the challenges are around poor coding or miscounted data in terms of the same patient being doubly counted because the coding might not have a way to distinguish and follow the patient. And so my question is around how do you make sure the data linkage is risk-free, and how does the panel sort of take care of that risk? Thank you.
Thank you, Samir. Did the panel hear that question? And if so, can I ask each of you to address that from your perspectives? James, I can see you nodding, so I'm going to go to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, Samir, thanks for the question. It's something we were dealing with yesterday, actually, in terms of we were looking at breast cancer and what happens if somebody has one breast cancer which has one molecular type, and another breast cancer, which has a different molecular type. How do you count that, and how does that turn up in aggregated statistics? So with data science in general, it is really important to know the quality of the data that you're dealing with. How good is it? And there are some things which you don't need particularly good quality data for. So real-time data to understand cancer data services, actually you don't curate it, it's aggregated, it's good enough for that. What we're finding is that there are different types of data which are appropriate to different questions. And what's pretty vital in terms of, I think, what all of the hubs are doing is the ability to curate the data to the minimum quality standard. I don't think we're in a situation in the UK now where all of the data is at the standard we would like it to be. So what we'll do is you'll either get places like perhaps Insight or Biobank that has invested very heavily in creating a data set. The key point of this is that you need different levels of quality data for different use cases, and we can respond to that either with the data that we have that's the right quality, or by curating it effectively, going through the source data and ensuring that it's the quality you need.
Thank you, James. Amanda and Piers, do you have anything different to add from your point of view, Amanda?
Just say that I absolutely agree. This is real world data, so it has all those complications of the real world in it. So different clinicians in different care settings coding data in different ways. We are striving to improve that, and the more we use the data, so the more times we use the data for different types of disease areas, the better it gets. So we've done a lot of investment in diabetes recently, type 2 diabetes, and we're understanding the data better in terms of what it says to us and how we can use that data to inform our insights around understanding that particular cohort of patients. And increasingly, as Dushan showed in his slide, as we start to work through different conditions, we're starting to get better understanding of the data and how we can use it to answer questions. We have, within our team, we have data scientists, we have data experts who understand the data, and also we work with clinicians. I think that clinical input is absolutely vital. In terms of any research collaboration we've formed in understanding the data and what it's saying to us and helping us clean it and make it curated for that specific research question.
I think it's a great question, Samir. I think the focus of the Insight Hub, and indeed our work even before forming the hub, has not really been on aggregate data. We provide patient level data, in particular ophthalmic images. And I think we have a lot of experience now in how to do that in a robust and safe fashion. As part of our pipelines, how we can anonymize it, how we can link it, how we can include both local and national opt-outs, et cetera, et cetera. And then, as James was saying, we work a lot on our quality management plans. So we have a lot of work on the quality assurance, the kind of provenance of the data, but also the quality control. So we have automated processes for doing quality control on our tabular data, but actually we also have developed artificial intelligence tools that can do automated assessments of the image quality and image labels and all of those things. And then lastly, ultimately, my experience in this space over the last few years is that you can only get so far with automated approaches, and you need to have processes in place for meticulous and manual curation of the data. And that was something that was really central to the success of the work that we've done with DeepMind and with Google, and that we published in Nature Medicine.
Thank you, panel. So there are a number of questions that have come up here, and there's one that's an interesting one here, which is to discover now, but I think it's applicable to the other panel members as well. And this one relates to an SME that is supporting patients with weight management and type 2 diabetes, but actually the crux is the access of comparator data for those going through the usual care pathway to do a head-to-head study or to compare the intervention against the usual care pathway. And the question is how does Discover Now in particular support the access of this comparator data? But I'm sure it would also apply to the other hubs as well. But Amanda, could you respond to that one to start with?
Yeah, thanks, Neelam. I had missed the question, but I've just found it. So we're doing very similar for the AstraZeneca type 2 diabetes work. We have the ability to be able to identify cohorts of patients who are using a particular product or intervention or going through a particular new service or pathway. And then we can compare that to a sort of a comparable, however we want to compare what the comparator group looks like, but we can set up a control arm to compare the outcomes for the two groups. And that's exactly what we're doing with AstraZeneca. So we have a high risk, identified a cohort of high risk type 2 diabetics who are receiving a new service, part of which involves using this new app where patients are reporting their metrics through the app, which goes into the linked healthcare record. We have another comparative group, and over a period of time, we're going to be assessing the outcomes of the two groups. So that is absolutely possible with the data that we've got in North West London.
Thanks, Amanda. And James and Piers, is this work that you also engage in terms of comparator data sets and supporting particularly SMEs for their work around their technologies? James?
Thanks, Neelam. So in cancer, the way we've seen this play out is something called synthetic normals, which is when you find a group of patients that are very, very difficult to find or very, very rare, and you try an experimental therapy on it. It's then a struggle to find patients like those that you don't treat with that therapy. So that tends to require quite a bit of curation and quite a bit of finding of those patients in feasibility. But that's the sort of thing that we've been asked about and we're trying to do for a couple of companies.
Great, thanks, James. Piers, anything more from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that sort of real world comparison is our bread and butter. So if you have a new therapy for, you know, an eye disease like AMD, diabetic retinopathy, retinal vein occlusion, glaucoma, any of the massive eye diseases, or new laser or new surgical intervention, new device, etc., then we can generate these very large real world examples to compare against. And then, you know, also as a more specific example, you know, if we think of things like intravitreal therapies, if you have a drug that is licensed for one indication, and for example, macular degeneration, we can provide real world data of how we're using it in many cases in off-license indications that may help with repurposing of some of these drugs.
Super, thank you, Piers. So the next question I'm just picking out here is one from Paul, actually. And the question is, can you comment on pricing models? Now, I'm assuming that is pricing models for how you operate. And I know, James, that you did share how you operate with companies in terms of your services. Amanda and Piers, I'm sorry if I've missed this, but could you answer that question and also in terms of what the best way of connecting with you is as well? Amanda.
Thanks, Neelam, and also Dushan might want to come in as well. But yeah, we have a current pricing model that is available. We have a tiered pricing structure, which I think is what Dushan highlighted for different types of organisations wishing to use the data. It's based upon currently a license model, a license payment for access to data, and then also if you require our time, sort of consultancy charges around that. We're also very keen to explore, along with HDR UK, more outcome-based sort of pricing models, more innovative pricing models around, rather than paying up front. Particularly, might be more pertinent, particularly for smaller companies. Actually, potentially quite keen to look at how we can potentially share in the success of any sort of potential products that are available to be commercialised as a result of the interaction with the data. So we have an existing, and please do talk to Dushan and I, meet you in the breakout rooms, and we can follow up any specifics.
Thanks, Amanda. Piers.
I think James summarized it very nicely, and we would have something very similar. The bottom line is that it would be some sort of cost recovery model for non-commercial research applications, and we really want to kind of supercharge that type of research around the UK and around the world, and then some sort of fair value for commercial applications. And as Amanda has said, we're open to different models depending on whether it's a pharmaceutical company, a tech company, or a smaller company. And you know, people can get in touch with me as Chief Data Officer or through the general inquiry line that's on the screen. And in particular, our Chief Operating Officer, Manjit Benning, will be able to give much more specifics than I can on the commercial models.
Neelam, can I just come in quickly? It's really important to note, I'm not sure it's come out of the conversations that we've had, that the hubs are not about making profit. So we are all not-for-profit organisations, I believe. So we are about, as Piers says, this sort of cost recovery is a really important component, that we are not about, you know, making lots of money out of this. Like the money, any revenue that is generated through these interactions go back to pay for these data assets and whatever else locally we may choose to do with this data. But I think it's a really important point.
Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, that is very important indeed. I'm just jumping to, and I apologise for those people that are putting their questions up, and I'm not asking you to ask verbally, just because we've got a number of them now. So let's go through them. And this one's a really interesting one about trust, actually, and how can we establish really good liaison with those groups who may be reluctant to make their personal data accessible. It's a question from Jay. Now, I know Amanda and Dusan, you have done a lot of work around privacy and trust. Is your sort of recommendation that companies come through you to ensure that trust is there, or what would you advise to that question? Amanda, if I can start with you first. Again, sorry.
It's a really interesting question, but that's what we're trying to establish, is as a sort of membership group who are, as a hub who's responsible for safe access to this data, that we are trying to build the right trust with our communities to enable us to make that data available. We are trying to understand what the concerns are and how we respond to those, and we're taking this very seriously. I think in the chat there's been the One London report has been shared. And we're equally doing some further work. It's actually happening this evening around sort of engaging with 40 citizens in North West London to understand what concerns they may have about direct access to data by commercial organisations. So very keen to listen and understand what those issues might be, and then use those responses really to guide how we design our programme of work and how we design our commercial models, our data access, our trusted research environments. I suppose the thing to add would be that we're very lucky to have this consent model as well in place, whereby we're trying to reach out to community groups and those who would like to get involved in research who maybe don't understand what research is. So we've got a team of people who are out in the community actually who work for the hub, trying to really engage at a local level really to understand those concerns and trying to encourage them to be part of research.
Thanks, Amanda. So that's your consent to contact programme, is it?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it's fair to say, Amanda, that's been running for some time now. So perhaps the other hubs aren't to that level of maturity, but Piers, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think that this is really, really important. I think in the future, trust will be the secret weapon, or maybe the magic ingredient that really unlocks patient benefits from the use of our data. I think the bottom line is that engagement and transparency is central to that. And that's something I think, we've done a lot of at the Insight Hub. So, we've given more than 100 lectures to patients and the public, done a huge amount of media engagement. We work with the company Sense About Science to learn about how best to do these things. As I've said, we're also working with the Open Data Institute around the Data Trust Advisory Board. And then lastly, just to say, the model that we use at Insight is around using routinely collected ophthalmic data, particularly ophthalmic images, to be able to share. Now, essentially the key point is that we anonymize those images. Now, and to do that, we take a 3-step approach to the anonymization of those images and associated clinical metadata. So we anonymize them to the highest standards, the Information Commissioner's Office, their standards, and even better. But also we kind of recognize that there is at least, that all medical images are potentially identifiable. There's at least a theoretical risk of re-identification and ensuing negative consequences for that. And so we think about this in a very careful way. So, what can we do to anonymize them? But also what other safeguards can we put in place, be those kind of contractual safeguards, safeguards around use of the data, access to the data in a safe environment, data minimization, etc. And then, as I've already said, the third and most vital component is just the engagement and transparency about what we're doing, and giving people the ability to opt out of what we're doing.
Thank you, Piers. James, anything more to add from your perspective?
First to say that Insight and Discover now are fantastic at this, but also to balance the question around, we need to not only show that we're secure in what we do, but also show how valuable what we're doing is to patients. And I think the work that's been going on around eye health is a really good example of this. So it's both making sure that people's wishes are respected and that their data is treated appropriately, but also showing that through using these data, we are getting new medicines developed and approved in the UK that are helping people. So I think we're looking two directions. Both, one is security and the second is patient impact. How can we use this data to make patients' lives better?
Thank you, James. So your answer to that question has just made me look at another question that's cropped up actually, which is from Susie. What are the challenges in linking actionable insights from the hubs to direct development of new medicines treatment? That's quite a deep question, I would say. But before I'm going to ask James, as you as you sort of answered the last question, before I ask you to respond to that one, we are running out of time, so we probably will make this our last question, but I'm not going to ignore all the other questions that have come up on chat. Thank you very much. And we will do our best to answer them individually and replay them back to you all. In particular, I think there are a number around respiratory, and I'm sad that we weren't able to get Breathe, the data hub that focuses on respiratory on this, but perhaps we will do in due course, but there are responses around respiratory there as well. So James, I think I gave you a few minutes to think about the answer to that question around actionable insights. So what were your thoughts around that?
Well, I mean, the COVID pandemic has shown us one thing really, really clearly, that we need good quality real-time information to protect the health of everyone. And that has been, it's borne out of terrible suffering, but I hope it's something that we can carry forward. So in terms of, can we improve everyone's health by sharing information? Absolutely, yes. And the hubs are part of that. HDR UK is part of that. This is it's an international initiative. In terms of the tight kind of question around developing new medicines takes 10 years. There's so many different parts that go into it. So the inflammatory bowel disease hub has got some really lovely early data sets for drug development. You've got Discover now, which is really close to the real world and getting close in pricing. So I think we all play our part in that chain. We can't say that we are all parts of that chain, but unless we make that chain work together, we will not get those new medicines. So it is happening. We'll all take our part.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, James. So I'm going to end the Q&A session now. A short thank you from me to all of you participating. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your engagement, and a big thank you to the hub teams for their organisation and information. It just leaves me to say that a recording of this session, as well as the slides, will be sent to you with an evaluation form. So please do share your feedback with us. There are contact details here also for you to keep in touch to the various hubs, as well as make sure that you reach out to us as well as MedCity, because it's not just about what we do in terms of convening experts that you've heard today. It's also about supporting businesses on other areas such as investment and other research needs that you may have. So thank you very much indeed, and have a great rest of the day. Bye.